This is an interview of Dr. Jose Angel Gutiérrez, professor of political science and founder of the Center for Mexican American Studies at the University of Texas at Arlington. He is also founder of the Raza Unida Party and a champion of Chicano communities for over 50 years. Welcome, Dr. Gutiérrez, very much.
Glad to be here. First time I've been in Notre Dame.
And I'm sure it won't be the last.
I hope so. I want to come all the time.
Especially in the winter.
I don't want sainthood, but I want to come all the time.
You have lived a life of challenging traditional structures of power in school systems, in local governments and universities to empower those whom these institutions have historically exploited and marginalized. What do you consider your greatest victory? You've had many. What would you consider your greatest victory in transforming structures of power?
My last one. It's always the last one. My institution, UT Arlington, has a growing Hispanic enrollment, but our leadership, which is new, and I say that to kind of mitigate the criticism. The president that came in was the first non-white male, and he didn't know what HSI stood for. And so we had to educate him that it was Hispanic Serving Institution, and that failure to do so would make UT Arlington, a Hispanic Using Institution, and that we didn't want that. So they did. They got the data, they applied, they got certified. Now they've been failing miserably at writing the proposals, but I haven't had a chance to put my finger into that. I'm excluded, I'm marginalized. But at least we got them into that category. Now they can go after the funding because that's sizable. And one of those grants, as you well know, you can divert, the government approves, you divert a certain percentage of the grant money for an endowment, provided you match it. So that's the fastest way to get money in reserve. That was last year. That was my last one.
In the time that you were heading the Raza Unida Party, what would you say was the greatest challenge you faced in the process of building up to that, and in the time you were governing, and now from the perspective of reflecting on that 40, 50 years later, what would you say was the primary challenge that you didn't anticipate? I know you're very good at anticipating those challenges.
I like dogs, and I've had dogs, but they stay outside the home. I don't have dogs in the house. I cannot stand cats, and that was the biggest challenge, herding all these cats from all over these states. We expanded the party to 17 states, plus the District of Columbia. So, if you add that up, that's about 18 different places, so we had about 21 different opinions of what we should be, where we should be going, what positions, what resources. It was like herding cats. And cats are selfish. They won't even look you in the eye when you feed them, They'll come and, rub against you when they want attention. And then the challenge of the legislation, each state, including the District of Columbia, which is not a state, but they have rules. We actually have like 51 political parties. And you've got to comply with these. In Illinois, we had to sue to get on the ballot. Boss Daley wouldn't allow us. In California, we never qualified. We had to borrow the Peace and Freedom label because they qualified and we ran under that label. In Texas, we qualified and we were decertified because they kept raising the ante on how many votes we had to have. So that was very difficult. And then the challenge of resources. It cost a lot of money, to have a governance structure, regardless of which party. In our case, we were poor to begin with, so we had a lot of problems. I'll give you just one example. The sheriff in Las Vegas, New Mexico, charged the entire chapter of the Raza Unida Party in Rio Arriba County with drug possession, drug use, and conspiracy to distribute. We had to spend an inordinate amount of money to prove that we were innocent, and we were able to turn this around and get the sheriff indicted for planting the evidence. He was convicted. He went to serve time. He was pardoned because they're all Democrats. He came back and then ran for state senate and won. So we had a worse problem. So you lose resources in ways that have nothing to do with building your party. You have to defend yourself because they target you for destruction. You got to constantly be watching the legislature because you're taking votes away from them, particularly Democrats. And then your people. Oh my God, everybody. What the saying in Espanol is, cada cabeza es un mundo. Everybody's got an idea and an opinion, and they're all leaders. That's why I said tread herding cats. It's hard.
What do you think has been your primary source of strength to persevere during times when victories were fleeting or seemed very distant?
Oh, that's easy. Tonatzin, la diosa Tonatzin, my mother and my daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you for those wonderful genes you gave me. I got tremendous stamina. I'm in your face. I'm Energizer Rabbit. Don't quit. Optimist, laughing. I find the silver lining in every problem. You know, I don't know. I'm just blessed.
And do you see that lacking in many other leaders today? That sense of perseverance, that inner, what I hear you saying in part is you have an inner strength and an inner optimism.
Well, I don't know what I get, but I got it, you know, and I use it. I don't ask why.
Do you see other people accept defeat too easily?
I see people being cynical. I see people being afraid. I see people denying reality. I see other people ignoring certain realities. I think it's kind of like who was no fan of mine. He's now deceased, poor guy. But the politics of disharmony. You know, there's a disconnect in what we expect and what we get. So there's a lot of people with a lot of different temperaments toward this politics and engagement. So you run the whole gamut of people from cynical to deniers to ignoring to tolerating the sufrida syndrome. You know, a lot of people say, well, that's you know, and I don't mean to be irreverent, but Dios manda. Well, no, God didn't put us here to suffer. You know, I don't think it's true that we got to suffer to get to heaven. I mean, come on. So there are a lot of people like that.
Do you think that's more common in Chicano and Latino communities than others? Or do you think
I'm
that's
ignorant.
a false attribution?
I'm ignorant because I don't know and I haven't lived those other lives. But I suspect that it's prevalent across humankind. I think this is part of the human condition, especially when we see the exploitation and the oppression around the world. I think this is pretty prevalent around the world. And the smart ones are the ones who know those weaknesses and those problems and exploit them to keep the people powerless and oppressed.
When you were in a position of very substantial influence, formal governmental office and so forth, you were, and you made some reference to this a little while ago, you know, very often charged with, challenged in court, charged with, given official charges, if you will, and questions raised and things, but actual formal charges in court that you constantly had to defend. And that was in part, of course, done because people didn't want you and the ideas that you had to be the ones in control and to be the ones in power.
To succeed, yeah.
Absolutely. So do you see that as a barrier that can never be overcome? When the people who are in the governmental office really do want to transform who gets served, who pays taxes, who's in power, you know, which communities are able to receive, is that an inevitable challenge that a transformative leader has to learn how to cope with? Because it seems to me it's almost impossible to cope with that sort of challenge.
No, it's not impossible, and yes, it's everywhere, and that is one of the conditions necessary for overcoming the barriers to effective leadership. I love to say, here I am, you know, getting older, unindicted, unconvicted. You know, I've gone to jail many times, but you know, I wanted to. This is called civil disobedience. But at one time in my career, for a year and a half, we had the Texas Attorney General and the government accounting officer from the federal government rent a whole floor in one of our bank buildings in town. They stayed there for that 18-month period, investigating us, trying to find something. And my biggest complaint is, as I said already, unindicted, unconvicted, they didn't give me a ribbon for honesty. You know, they just couldn't find anything, because you need to know that that's going to happen. And you need to watch your step. You need to be careful what you do, how you say things. For example, the most difficult charge and the easiest one to bring is conspiracy. You know, the minute you sit down to talk about ideas, that's conspiracy. So it's very difficult and very dangerous. You need to be aware that there are enemies out there who gain from putting you away, from the federal government all the way down to the local politicians. In fact, in the history of our life as a nation, we've had FBI directors who've made it a point to stifle dissent. You know, they're at war with the citizenry. They call it the counterintelligence program under the FBI. I mean, so it's very real. destroy you, neutralize you, disrupt you, character assassinate you, and if necessary, take executive action. That means killing you.
What advice would you have for those who would want to be transformative leaders today to be able to cope with what you just described?
It's a hell of a roller coaster ride, and if you like roller coasters, you'll love the game. Get into it. Let's do it.
What would you say is the most critical skill necessary to be a transformative leader?
Listening.
And talk a little bit more about that.
You have to listen to learn and understand. To learn and understand by yourself first. When you listen, you can compare, you can make analysis and stuff. Patience. Take your time. The problem's going to be there, and you can chip away at it. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it's quicker. You need to believe in yourself. I think that the essence of leadership is intuition. Just like you meet someone, you immediately your body, your person tells you, I like this person or I don't like this person. Mm-hmm. Follow your intuition. You're always going to come out a winner if you follow your instincts, your intuition, your feeling. If you feel good about it, do it. It doesn't matter what the world says that you're doing wrong. If you are comfortable, do it. And get others to agree with that and get going. You will accomplish a lot of goals. Strategic planning, we didn't cause these problems yesterday. They've been millenniums in the making, particularly the status quo. And there's a lot of vested parties to maintain the status quo. So you need effective long-term strategic plans, but broken up into 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15 year. Or putting it another way, as I've discussed in my classes with students, I make them write an obituary. How are you going to leave this world a better place? Put it down. What are you going to accomplish? What do you want to be known as? And once they do that, then I ask them, how are you going to get there? What's the plan? What resources do we need? Who's going to help you? All the important questions, which is what you're asking, that you put all that together, you're going to be a winner.
So, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're suggesting that the first part of being a transformative leader is to identify what you want to do, but then sit back and think about it, study it, and develop that strategic plan, as you put it. Is that right?
That's
See
right.
that as a critical component. Not that you only stop there, then you have to take action on the basis of it, but that's a very critical component, that analytical phase.
But that's the external listening. Listen to your body, listen to your thought, listen to your values, listen to your heart, listen to your passion. And if you feel emotional and angry, those are very good vibes. I would even dare say hate is a good vibe, because, that teaches you a lot about you and your shortcomings or your targets or, what you perceive to be a problem. So you need to listen to yourself and you need to listen to others. Find the matches, and then implement that obituary that we talked about.
What do you see as the primary challenge today confronting Chicano and Latino communities that want to transform themselves to be more inclusive and have greater levels of self-determination for themselves? Is it the same type of challenges that were faced 50 years ago when you began this work? Or are they different today than they were before? What's similar and what is different? Maybe that's the best way to put it.
It's all the same differences. It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but I think that the biggest problem we face now is the Office of Management and Budget, Directive 15, issued in May 1977. Mm-hmm. We're divided from within and divided from without, because that little directive from the Office of Management and Budget creates a labeling process, race and ethnicity. We don't know who we are, and the government changes its mind as to who we were supposed to be. So we have a problem of identity. And when you have a problem of identity, you cannot create solidarity or homogeneity. It's very difficult. So then you can't march, toward the same goal at the same time to the same tune. Mm-hmm. So that's one major problem, and the government causes that. On the other hand, we still have very low levels of ignorance, and that's on purpose. We do not do well with the educational institution. They don't want us there. The curriculum is not there for us. The content in the curriculum is not about us. So you immediately engage in a subtractive process, taking away who you are. We already have a problem of identity. So now you have then the schooling institution taking away what little vestiges you got, so you become a non-entity, a non-player, highly cynical, maybe apathetic, scared, not willing to participate. So we basically become dropouts of society. We don't have the jobs, the education to get the good wage. We're constantly in a downward spiral or about to fall without insurance, without money, without this, without that. We're not healthy as a community, as a people. And you can't talk to people about grand visions, grand schemes and plans when they want to know about the next meal. Or they want to know about where they're going to be tomorrow, where they're going to sleep, what can they do for their kids. Those are more pressing issues. So they don't want to have political talk or ideas or philosophies. They want food on the table. They want a job. They want to take care of themselves. We're very low on the socioeconomic ladder and are kept there.
And do you see any possibility that those very real material needs can be addressed in anything like the current political environment where those sorts of discussions seem to be off the table in so many different levels of government?
In theory, they could be solved tomorrow. There's just no willingness to do so. There's no ganas. There's no collective. Well, for example, we had a great president. Well, two. Well, one actually called it for real, the war on poverty, Lyndon Johnson. Well, looking at our history, every war we've engaged in, whether it's material or whether it's real, we lose. How can the world's greatest country on this planet not be able to win a war against poverty or win a war in Iraq or win a war in Vietnam? I mean, there's something inherently wrong here. I would suggest that part of that is defective thinking, wrong goals, but more importantly, the lack of will to really solve the problem. Roosevelt, at another time, he could have been president for life, I suppose, but he did some very good things to uplift the boats of everybody. You pay someone an adequate wage, you guarantee them they're going to be able to work, they'll take care of themselves. They'll take care of their families. They'll take care of everybody. And they will pay taxes willingly. But when you have, double-digit unemployment as a norm, and then you get to the borderlands, for example, where we reside geographically and historically, that's chronic underemployment, 35, 37, 40% in Stark County, Webb County. That's the development of underdevelopment. That's serious business, and that's been the case.
The jobs are not there. It's not that people don't want to work.
Exactly. No.
The employment opportunities aren't there.
That's correct.
But in those
historically, not just yesterday or the recession in 2008. No.
How would you respond to those who would say, but those areas of Texas where you're from, southern border regions of the state, have been the parts of the state that have had Chicano, Mexican-American elected officials for the longest period of time. So why haven't they been able to solve those problems?
There's two different views. I remember Reverend Jesse Jackson, when he was running for president, I think it was 88, maybe 84. One of those times, he came to Texas, and he went down to the valley thinking he was going to be received like a savior, and he pointed these things out. And every single Mexican-American elected official denounced him, saying, how dare you come talk about these problems here? They didn't see it as an opportunity for solution. They saw it as someone criticizing them for inactivity, which is exactly what's going on. You can look at this in different ways. For example, there is over 1 million voters in the South Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley. But it's the same million voters. They don't want to empower anybody else because they win their system by keeping their voters. They don't want to share. Even the politiqueras, you have to hire them. And you better make sure that you work in tandem, because if you hire one, they'll only get votes and only mark that piece of the ballot instead of all the rest of it. It's a feudal system still. It's just that we've changed from white faces to brown faces. Nothing much changes, and that's what creates a cynicism among the public, and says, well, why vote? Nothing's going to change. Or the fatalist, deterministic kind of thing. Well, that's the way it is. And
do you see that ever changing?
Well, I'm a forever optimist. Given a chance, yes, and I got a chance to do it for a decade, and I did in Zavala County. But then, as you pointed out at the beginning, you get the charges, at one time, just in civil suits against me.
Yeah.
I was probably the most richest man in America. More than Bill Gates. I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars I was worth in liability.
And And is it because there aren't the leaders who are in that region of the state that are running for office? Or there are people who have the sort of what I'm going to call transformative agenda running for office and they're not being elected because of the traditions of the area or the powers that are there already or what? Do you see a lot of new ideas developing, I guess is another way of asking my question, for that region of the state that you know so well? Not only in that region of the state, but that region of the state that...
I think we have a crisis in leadership and a crisis in vision. I don't see that kind of transformative leader out there. I see a lot of transactional leaders willing to cut deals. What does it take? And that's the essence of their view of what politics is. You know, not getting 100% of your agenda, negotiating, getting maybe 50%. That to them is victory. And to a lot of people, unfortunately, arriving, what I said at the end of the last question, arriving into a position of power, that to them is the victory. Because we were not judges, we were not governors, we're not this, and now we are, so see, we won. You hear this syndrome along the border all the way to California. You go visit a border town and they'll tell you, we control here. You know, all the Mexicans are, you don't. If you look at who owns Webb County or who owns El Paso County or, you know, Starr County, it's that same 10, 11, 12%. Nobody wants to address the elephant in the room, but it's there all the time, and it's been there historically. And the inequality of wealth and income, two different things. You know, we don't have the base to build long-lasting organizations and institutions. On the other hand, we don't even have the money to make short-term change and reform. It's very expensive. Like the example I gave you about that sheriff, Naranjo, that was his name. Emilio Naranjo was his name. Or is his name, maybe he's still alive. I don't see a collective kind of agenda that says we're going to go change South Texas. It's going to end with this generation. It could. A governor could do this. The legislature could do this. A handful of county judges could do this, but they don't. Look at the cuts in budgeting. Look at the debates at the federal level, at the local level. They want to cut education, and they've been cutting it. How can we have a leadership from our state and as a nation in the world if we're creating a bunch of dumb people? It's so simple, but that's the answer at the moment.
And you see that as entirely different from what you and others were trying to do through the Razonida party.
Yes, we thought that we could use political power to change, you know, or could be the counterweight to other kind of power. And you can, because you become the law. It's no longer Gutiérrez saying it's the law or it's the policy or that's the expectation in this curriculum. So yes, you can make fundamental change, not revolutionary, but fundamental change enough that you do alter over time the culture. You know, from a culture of poverty and ignorance and downward spiral, you can create a culture of success and of achievement and of transformation. People do it all the time, but it does take a collective will and making it number one on the agenda, that we're all on the same page, all marching in the same direction, and that's very hard to do.
And that was maintained, you said earlier, if I remember correctly, for about 10 years, would you say?
Well, it depends where we're talking about. For example, there's still people in California that are registered under the Razonida because that's a closed primary system. When you go register, you have to declare. And if you say Razonida, you're going to be Razonida for life or until you go and change that.
And change it.
There's a lot of people that don't change it. Now, they're not able to vote in the primaries. They're able to vote in November, but they're happy because they are proud of their identity, political identity. In Texas, you say, I'm Razonida, say, what's that? You know, it's gone from the memory because the last time we were on the ballot was 1986. Well, that's, I don't know how many years is that, about 20 some odd years ago.
Right.
That's almost an entire generation. And the Office of Management and Budget Directive, there are children who are now adults who have never heard their ethnic label or identification to be anything other than Hispanic. So you say, I'm Chicano, I say, what's that? Or I'm Latino, or you're from Latin America. They just know Hispanic, and they can't tell you what that is, but they know that's what they are. That's very difficult. When it's that ambiguous, that vague, you cannot create homogeneity, solidarity, unity. everybody thinks they're different.
What do you hope to leave as your greatest legacy to Chicano and Latino communities?
Oh, I don't know. They'll never stop trying. That still will make it a better world. And determined that I'm going to do it.
And
I don't even want to go to my own funeral.
You are an optimist.
I'm too busy. I'm
Yes,
too busy.
You are an optimist.
You're going to have to take me there.
One of the things that we're trying to do here at Notre Dame, as you know, is to develop this program in transformative, what we're calling Latino leadership. What advice do you have for us?
Well,
Very honest advice.
from
do you have
what
for
little
us
I've seen,
in thinking about how to do this.
from what little I've seen, there's a good cadre of people that have been here for now 10, 15 years. The fact that you're doing these interviews and you're talking about the subject of leadership, this is a big important area that we've neglected for a long, long time. You cannot have effective followers if you don't have good leaders, and you can't make good leaders if you have defective followers. That's where they come from. That's the ranks. So dedicating this study, this serious study, this examination, these interviews, so that you can share information and points of view and opinion. This is a necessary ingredient. That's the good way to make the guacamole. It's a good mix. I think you've got the resources, you've got the support of the faith, you got the institution. That's a long way, because across the country, every Chicano Latino Studies program has been born out of struggle.
That's right.
You go to jail, you protest, right here at Chapman Hall in Wisconsin, people went to jail for that, but now it's there. So this is a welcome respite. Nobody has to go to jail here. Maybe it's a slower pace, but it's growing, and you need long-term commitment. So this is it. This is wonderful. I just wish you well and wish you more riches, so you bring more students and more faculty and more books get published. Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Do you have any regrets as you look over your work and career over the last 50 years? I know you're an optimist.
Yes.
But you're also very honest and very self-reflective. Yeah. In the works that I read of yours and in conversations that we've had, you're different than other, in my opinion, different than other activist, thoughtful, scholarly leaders. And I mean each of those is a different part of who you are. In that there's tremendous amounts of self-reflection. Always there. That doesn't come across with a lot of folks.
My biggest regret is that I'm 70 years old and I can't afford body parts. I'm going to wear out soon here. And I'm very conscious of that, because I'm the last one standing of what was called Four Horsemen. Tijerina, Chavez, Corky. I'm the only one alive now. We buried Tijerina 2 weeks ago.
Right.
I'm very aware of that.
So anything else? Any other thoughts regarding?
I think I'll start a PAC to buy my body parts. Make donations, anybody.
A political action committee to be able to do that. Yeah, that would be good. Do you see any sparks anywhere in the country that are consistent with the sort of vision and passion that you and so many others had in the 60s and 70s to use government to help those who needed help the most, and to try to do it in a way that would allow people to have more choices than they've ever had before in their lives? Do you see that anywhere in the United States today?
I do. There are a lot of more elected officials to talk about those people. And there's a lot of bright stars among that group. And every election cycle, we increase another 1 or 2%, as well as in the voting population. We're getting beyond critical mass to significant, mass. So it's all coming. It's all coming. I'm just concerned that we're not as prepared for this coming. We're not seriously looking at this and pinpointing, say, okay, it's going to happen in 2052. On April 17th at 3 in the morning, we're going to wake up, and it's going to be a day with a lot of Mexicans, not a day without a Mexican like the movie. We're not there. We have no strategic plans for that, but we know it's coming. We're having probably a substantial body of literature. People can read about us. We can read about ourselves. It's beginning. We've got some beginning films and documentaries and material that you can now, with the social media, global distribution. So we are internationalizing ourselves. We're all already world citizens, but we're not studying even that level of how we fit in this world and how we're going to make that world. Questions that we need to address. I think in the very near future, we're going to be women-led. I don't think men know how to follow women, their leadership, and their leadership style is different. We don't even know what that is. We think it's alien as males. You know, what? Hold hands, cry, hug? Well, what are you talking about? I'm a guy. I don't do that. Well, we're going to pay the price as we have been paying. You know, we as a generalization, you know, male leadership is, you know, power over and coercive power. I mean, that's we thrive at that. We want to be that 800-pound gorilla, not the little, you know, prissy chimpanzee. But sometimes that's what it takes, you know, and you need to calm down and be compassionate as opposed to, you know, macho and forceful. We need to study all this because it's coming. It's coming. The women are getting more educational degrees than we are. Across the board, black, white, yellow, whatever. Women. We're going to be women-led. Now, the world is changing. I don't think that we're going to continue being a superpower. Now, militarily, we probably have more nukes to, you know, to kill the world over 20 times. But that's not the kind of wars we're fighting. So the peace dividend is elusive. We're spending too much money trying to fight the world, the battle of ideas or religions, and we're not investing enough, you know, in the infrastructure. Because I think that the more education you have, the less belligerent we would be. Education does breed tolerance, you know, and appreciation for diversity instead of seeing it as distinct, different, and hatred. But we don't invest in that. It's the contrary. We'll buy more bombs than lower tuition. So we've got some major problems coming. We're not quite ready to even study them or acknowledge them, but they're coming, and we know that. We're smart enough to know that, and I think that's the key for what you're doing here, as well as other places that have such similar institutes, to have these discussions. At least the beginning, raising the questions. Maybe we don't have the answers, but it's important to ask the question.
I have two more questions for you. How would you respond to those in our country who are fearful of the type of demographic growth that our growing Latino communities, Mexican origin, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Ecuadorian, all together, right, who fear the type of demographic that is unquestionably occurring, right? It could shift in the future, but if current trends continue. And would you expect those who have that fear, how would you explain to them that they should not be fearful? Or that they shouldn't fear that this group wants to take away what they already have or think that they may already have?
The key is just knowing somebody, because if you don't know somebody, you make you demonize them. You know, you make them something that's not human. So get to know somebody. I used to be glib and say, well, marry a Mexican. You know, that'll solve a problem. We'll be related. And you don't hurt your family. You know, you always got that nasty uncle, but it's still your uncle, right? And you put up with him at the picnic.
We all have that uncle.
Of course. Well, marry a Mexican. You know, adopt a Mexican. That'll solve it right away. Now, the other real answer as well is the education. You know, if you learn about someone, whether it's through food or music or dance or entertainment or discussion or poetry or whatever way it is, to start that educational process, that's very liberating, because you'd be surprised. I always thought that I could not eat Chinese food. I never had eaten it before. I just the thought of it, you know, and going through a fish market, it's like, oh no, man, no way. Now you can't get me away from there. I mean, I'd rather have Chinese food, but I didn't know. And all this time, I kept me from eating it. I was the one that was at fault, not the food, because I had all these misconceptions. So you got to know, got to experience. So travel, education, or bringing the world to them through a movie or a classroom discussion, or something, that I think will make us all come closer. Now, I also, you know, am a pretty nasty guy sometimes. Sometimes you need the shock of that bigot and say, you know what? Keep your bigotry. I'm going to treat you the same way tomorrow that you're treating me, because we are going to govern tomorrow. You ready for that? You ready to get some of your own medicine? That's quite sobering. Now, it may be a nasty thing to say, but it does get people thinking, like, wait a minute. Kind of like in the aging process, you know, in your mind, you're still 26, and you can delude yourself saying, well, I'm going to kick that young man's ass, you know? Well, you can't. Come on, get over it. So being confrontational, bringing a reality to people's face, sometimes makes them reflect and say, well, maybe they got a point here. Maybe we got to lighten up. If I'm going to depend on them for my Social Security pension, maybe I ought to invest in an immigrant. Maybe we got to pay them a little bit more. Maybe we got to get them a high school diploma so they earn more and pay more so I can get my pension. Finding the things that we have in common, but with tough talk. You want me to treat you the way you treat me today? We'll do that tomorrow because we will govern.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I just commend you again. I think this is great. I hope you keep doing these interviews. I'll be glad to give you a list of people that I think you should interview who could probably do a better job than I can.
Thank you very much for coming to visit us in February on a cold single-digit day, and we know that you're going to be around for at least another 20 years.
And if I'm not, no dejen caer la bandera.
And we won't be surprised if you're there. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Gutiérrez.
All right.